Hello once again, my name's Charles R. Sabo doing another teaching video on the book of Isaiah. Now to this point I have completed the first 20 chapters on the book of Isaiah, Bible commentary. It comes from a PDF that I wrote in a book that I wrote back in 2018, 2019, had it published in January of 2020, 623 page hardback binder Bible commentary. And great and used for seminary, through Bible studies, and just in plain research for whatever you're trying to do with the Word of God. All right, now I moved to chapter 21. Chapter 20 was a very short and sweet chapter about a coming judgment against Egypt and Ethiopia. Here in chapter 21, it's a very, very layered and complex chapter. Please follow it with me, and I'll open your eyes to what the Lord has intended here. A highly interpreted chapter, and the Lord gave me this. I did much research and found this to be amazing. So I'm going to go into a little brief introduction of the chapter and then right into verse 1. All right, so Isaiah chapter 21 can be broken down into three separate burdens or judgments. The first judgment is against the Chaldeans of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Okay, the Neo-Babylonian Empire, the Chaldeans, was reigned from 626 BC through 539 BC. This is prophesied by Isaiah in verses 1 through 10 in this chapter. Then he switches to the second burden or judgment, which is of the descendants of Duma, within verses 11 through 12. In the prophecy in this chapter, the children of Duma are those of the descendants of Edom, who were the children of Esau, twin brother of Jacob. This is not to be confused with the city of Duma, which was the city Duma had settled into in Arabia, who was one of the 12 sons of Ishmael. So don't confuse the two. All right. It is, and that's Genesis 25:14. Now, it is mentioned that Esau had married Mahalath, okay? Now, who was one of the daughters of Ishmael. That's Genesis 28:9. Mahalath may have been the daughter of Duma, which would make her also a daughter of Ishmael, okay? Granddaughters and grandsons are not indicated within the Bible. Therefore, when a son or daughter of a person is mentioned, it may be meant as a descendant context. May, not all the time. The city of Duma is mentioned in Joshua 15:52, being the tribe of Judah, initially as the Israelites came into the land after the Exodus. With the context of Isaiah 21:11 through 12, the association with Duma and Edom indicates that Isaiah is not prophesying against the city of Duma of Arabia, but of Mount Seir of Edomia, who were descendants of Duma and Esau, from a marriage between Esau and Mahalath. All right, a lot to contemplate there, but rewind, look at it again, read it again, what I just spoke to you. The third burden, verses 13 through 18, is to those of Arabia, and specifically to those of the descendants of Dedan. Dedan was the son of Ra'amah, which is mentioned in Genesis 10:7. The first Chaldean king of Babylon was Nabopolassar, who was an Aramaean of the Chaldee tribe, which is also known as the Chaldeans. After a year of guerrilla-type warfare, Nabopolassar sat on the throne of Babylon in November 23rd, 626 BC. This was the 11th and last dynasty of Babylon, known as the Chaldean Empire or the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Okay, a little bit of history there. Nabopolassar took Nippur while also liberating Sumer and Akkad. By 617 BC, he had cleared out of Babylonia the Assyrian garrisons south of the Neck. In 616 BC, he marched upon the Euphrates to the district of Haran, to Arupka and Ashur. He established bases in this area. In 614 BC, Cyaxares of Media marched against Nineveh, which was too strong for him, but he took Asher and Tarbasu and inflicted great destruction. Nabopolassar met him after the battle, and they established a friendship. A marriage did seal this union, in which the Babylonian prince Nebuchadnezzar would marry Amidis. In 613 BC, the Medes were inactive. This allowed Assyria to mount a counterattack. In 612 BC, Nabopolassar united the Saxaris and the Umanmanda in an attack on Nineveh. After a 2 or 3 month siege, they destroyed the famous city of Nineveh. The city was sacked and plundered, and the people were enslaved. Okay, the fall of Nineveh at the hands of the first Neo-Babylonian king, Nabopolassar, father of Nebuchadnezzar. After the death of Nebuchadnezzar in 562 BC, the Babylonian Empire began to weaken. 23 years and 3 kings later, Babylon fell to King Cyrus of Persia in 539 BC. Belshazzar, who was son of Nabonidus, reigned as a co-regent ruler with his father from 556 BC until 539 BC. It is unclear how old Belshazzar was when he started with his appointed position. If one reads in Daniel chapter 5, one can see Belshazzar had been taken by surprise by Cyrus. The Medes and the Persians were in alliance with one another and developed an even stronger empire than Babylon. But the Median Persia Empire was not as tightly governed, okay, because they had divided the kingdom, right? This would bring them a weakness that eventually would cause a fall to the Greeks and Alexander the Great, okay? So there's some review of history, okay, of Babylon, so that when we're reading through these verses here in chapter 21, you kind of know what's going on slightly, all right? Slightly. All right, so we're going to go into verse 1. The burden of the desert of the sea. As whirlwinds in the south pass through, so it comes from the desert, from a terrible land. Now keep in mind, Isaiah wrote this before Babylon even became, Neo-Babylon, the Chaldeans, even became into existence. So to write this is definitely prophecy, because it was the Assyrians at this time that were in existence, all right, in the early 8th century BC. All right, the desert of the sea, or wilderness of the sea, here refers to the heavy marshes and lakes within Babylon. Babylon was to find their trouble from a terrible land. The comparison is provided for Isaiah's readers to realize that the south winds, which burden the land, sweeps through like a whirlwind. Their burden will come from the desert of Iran, Persia. It comes from the desert, which was formerly known during this time as Elam. All right, it wasn't Persia back then, it was Elam. It didn't become Persia until the Medes and the Persians with King Cyrus, right? Okay. The Persians, the Elamites, were known to be brutal in their attacks. In 553 BC, Cyrus, king of Persia, rebelled against his suzerain, the Mede king Astyages, son of Cyaxares, who finally won a decisive victory in 550 BC, resulting in Astyages captured by his own dissatisfied nobles, who promptly turned him over to the triumphant Cyrus. Thus, then were the Medes subjected to their close kin, the Persians, or Elamites. In the new empire, they retained a prominent position in honor and war. They stood next to the Persians. Their court ceremony was adopted in their new sovereigns, who in the summer months resided in Ecbatana, and many noble Medes were employed as officials, satraps, and generals. Okay? All right, so Daniel 7:5 says, "And behold, another beast, a second like a bear, and it raised up itself as one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh." Well, the bear had, the bear had one paw raised, right? Okay, so the bear had 3 ribs in its mouth. The Medo-Persian bear is pictured as devouring 3 provinces or kingdoms, namely Lydia in 546 BC, Babylon in 539 BC, and Egypt in 525 BC. The command to rise and devour much flesh indicates the extreme cruelties often practiced by the Medes and the Persians during the wide extent of their conquests. Isaiah wrote of their brutalities within Isaiah 13, 17 through 19, from a terrible land. The reason why the bear's paw is raised up, because one of the kingdoms was stronger or higher than the other. Persia was higher than the Medes, right? I don't know if you've studied that. Anyway, Isaiah 21 verse 2. A grievous vision is declared unto me. The treacherous dealer deals treacherously, and the spoiler spoils. Go up, O Elam, besiege, O Media. All the sighing thereof have I made to cease. Notice that first of all, notice that Isaiah is calling Persia here Elam, because Persia didn't exist yet, and it was still called Elam back then. When Cyrus was to come in, he would change it to Persia. And obviously Isaiah eventually named King Cyrus 100 years before he existed. But in this case, he's prophesying to people who don't know this, who don't know that Persia. If he would have said, "Oh, Persia," they'd be like, "Who's Persia?" And here, Elam, everybody knows. Everybody knows who Elam is. Isaiah was shown a vision of the armies of the Medes and the Persians as they marched into Babylon. Their reputation was indicated to Isaiah to reveal what Daniel later would declare Medo-Persia, to devour much flesh, right? With Isaiah's vision, he is told to command Elam, Persia, and Media to go up and besiege. The sighing, okay, sighing, right here, thereof have I made to cease. The sighing was most likely the sighs of the children of Israel, who were still living in captivity, and sighing as they waited on the Lord to free them. All right? All sighing thereof have I made to cease. So when Persia and Media, the Medians, Medes and the Persians, attacked Babylon, God caused the sighing of Israel to cease. All right? Does that make sense? Okay. Therefore, and this is verse 3, therefore are my loins filled with pain. Pangs have taken hold upon me, as the pangs of a woman that travails. I was bowed down at the hearing of it. I was dismayed at the seeing of it. All right. Isaiah's anticipation of the destruction of Babylon was a feeling of distress, as he saw the brutality of the Medes and the Persians within his vision. As I covered the brutality that happened over Babylon in Isaiah 13, 18 through 19. So go back to that video. I have that video online of chapter 13. The takeover of Babylon was not a bloodbath, as was prophesied, but a low violence takeover. This violence was to come later, when the Babylonians would uprise, that should be one word, would uprise against the Medians governing over them. Okay, after the death of Cyrus, the Babylonians upraised against Darius, the Mede, and bade defiance against all of Persia. To push back against the Babylonians, the Medes and the Persians resolved by strangling all the women, except the mothers of one woman for each family, to make bread. Darius ordered 3,000 of the most distinguished of the nobility to be put to death. The Medes were excellent archers and may have been overwhelming to the Babylonian men. Okay, so the brutality that was for the bear, go devour much flesh, came after the attack and destruction or takedown of Babylon. It came in the, governing of the Babylonians that caused the devouring of much flesh. Okay, it was after they took down Babylon and they were captive with the hands of the Medes and the Persians that all happened. So go back to chapter 13. I handle it in a little bit more detail. All right, now verse 4. My heart panted, fearfulness affrighted me. The night of my pleasure hath he turned into fear unto me. Isaiah reveals that he may have settled down to sleep and was interrupted with this vision by God. hath he turned into fear unto me, is what Isaiah said. He is the Lord, and he interrupted Isaiah's calm, pleasant evening with this vision. It's an upsetting vision to watch the devourer of much flesh that the Medes and Persians did over Babylon while they were in captivity, basically. The Babylons were being held in captivity and did do an uprising. It's history now. So what I have told you here, the violence here, all right, through here, I got that from Ingram Coben, the notes, critical, explanatory, and practical on the book of the prophet Isaiah. Okay, so that person gave me some details on why Isaiah was distressed, which he's referring to history. It's historical account now of what happened to the Babylonians once the Medes and Persians took them captive. All right, verse 5. Prepare the table, watch in the watchtower, eat, drink, arise, you princes, and anoint the shield. As Isaiah speaks prophecy, he advises the Babylonians to prepare the table for their party-like festivities. Let the watcher at the watchtower watch while they eat, drink, and be merry. The princes of the Medes and Persians anoint their shields as they enter into the foolish city, who were too busy partying into the night. All right, and I'll read you something from Daniel 5:1. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to the thousands of his lords and drank wine before the thousand. All right. This prophecy by Isaiah was approximately 170 years before it happened. All right. So we can read about it in Daniel chapter 5. Isaiah 21 verse 6. For thus hath the Lord said unto me, Go, set a watchman, let him declare what he sees. Here's where you're going to be amazed. You're going to be amazed with this. The one who declared what he saw of this event was the prophet Daniel. Therefore, the watchman here is Daniel. Isaiah told of Daniel, the watchman, around 170 years before he witnessed this event, who wrote about it within his writings in the book of Daniel. All right? If you read Daniel chapter 5, Daniel's writing as a historian. He's writing as a historian, just as Isaiah prophesied in Isaiah 21, verse 6. He said, For thus hath the Lord said unto me, Go, set a watchman, let him declare what he sees. Isn't that amazing? The prophet Daniel was prophesied by Isaiah. I should say historian in this case. You're going to see something even more amazing later on here. And he saw a chariot with a couple of horsemen, a chariot of asses, and a chariot of camels, and he hearkened diligently with much heed. Daniel was the prophet on duty when the Medes and the Persians were entering in unexpectedly. Daniel saw the army of the Medes and Persians with their unusual cavalcade of horses, attended by those beasts of burden, asses and camels, which accompanied armies, right? Moving towards Babylon. Daniel diligently gave heed to the writing of the wall on the wall, which the hand of God had written, mene tekel upharsin. Sorry about that. It's Hebrew. Mene tekel upharsin. Daniel 5:25. And he hearkened diligently with much heed. All right. And I'm going to read you this. Daniel 5:26 and through 28. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God hath remembered your kingdom and finished it. Tekel, you are weighed in the balances and are found wanting. Peres, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Right? So Daniel gave heed to the Babylonians that this was coming. Right? Okay. And he cried, this is verse 8, and he cried, A lion, my lord, I stand continually upon the watchtower in the daytime, and I have sat in my ward whole nights. Daniel was the prophet who saw the vision of the lion with the eagle's wings. Daniel 7:4. He prophesied of the Medo-Persian bear, which was to come and defeat the lion of Babylon. Daniel 7:5. Daniel was the watchman for his Lord, who watched over the children of the captivity. He was the prophet who God kept in Babylon day and night, watching over the lion, Babylon, while in anticipation of this night. He's there. He's the watchman, watching the captivity night and day. All right, verse 9. And behold, here comes a chariot of men with a couple of horsemen. And he answered and said, Babylon is fallen, and all graven images of her gods he hath broken unto the ground. Right? Daniel beheld this event as it took place after so many years of anticipation. Amazingly, Isaiah conveys here what Daniel was to say. Here comes a chariot of men with a couple of horsemen. Now, here we're going to read Daniel 5:28. Your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Right? The prophet Daniel and the apostle John both bring similar looks at the apocalypse. Isaiah here reveals that Daniel will declare that the Chaldean Babylon has fallen. That's Daniel 5:30 through 31. While John declares a spiritual battle will fall during the 70th week of Daniel, 7-year tribulation. Babylon is fallen. That's Revelation 18:2. The graven images of Chaldean Babylon were broken down, and the graven images of Babylon the Great will also be broken down as prophesied by John in Revelation 18:2 and 3. Okay. Verse 10. O my threshing, and the corn of my floor, that which I have heard of the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, have I declared unto you. This is being spoken by God concerning his judgment of Israel's oppressor, who God himself has sent to oppress them. He separated the wheat from the chaff, the good Jews from the bad, or the corn from the chaff, and begins to change their oppressors to the Medes and Persians. The Persians in turn freed the remnant to go back to their land after the 70 years had been fulfilled, right? So the corn of my floor, that which I have heard of the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, have I declared unto you. He divided the good from the chaff, the wheat from the chaff, the corn from the chaff, and then brought them back. Okay. Verses 11 and 12. Now we're getting into the burden of Duma, right? The burden of Babylon is done. The burden of Duma. The burden of Duma, he calls to me out of Seir, watchman, what of the night? Watchman, what of the night? Get ready, because you're going to be amazed. Watchman should be the prophet of Mount Seir during this time, because he was the watchman over their souls of well-being. Once again, Isaiah prophesies about another future prophet. The prophet is Ezekiel, who was warned of his responsibilities first in Ezekiel 33, then prophesied against these inhabitants of Mount Seir in Ezekiel 35. Okay, what? All right, well, here, let's look at this. But if the watchmen see the sword come, and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword come, and take any person from among them, he is taken away in iniquity, but his blood will require of at that watchman's hand. So you, O son of man, I have set you as a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore you shall hear the word of my mouth, and warn them from me. All right. After God provided Ezekiel with his warning of the watchmen and their responsibilities in Ezekiel 33, he had Ezekiel prophesy against Mount Seir in Ezekiel 35. The watchman said, the morning comes, and also the night. If you will inquire you, return come. Within this verse, God is foretelling of Ezekiel and his warning of Mount Seir and their destruction to come. Ezekiel was to warn Mount Seir, Edom, that the deliverance of the Jews would come to its appointed time, but the day of their prosperity would be succeeded by the dark night of adversity. What of the night? And that after the short continuance of approaching prosperity to the Edomites, a dreadful ruin would come upon them, of which a prophet saw no end. What of the night? All right? All right, so I'm going to read you something from Ezekiel 35, 3 through 5. And say unto it, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, O Mount Seir, I am against you. I will stretch out my hand against you, and I will make you most desolate. I will lay your cities waste, and you shall be desolate, and you shall know that I am the Lord, because you have had a perpetual hatred, and has shed the blood of the children of Israel, by the force, by the sword, in the time of the calamity, in the time that their iniquity had an end. So the watchman is proclaiming to Mount Seir right now, the Edomites, that you're going to go down because of what you've done to the children of Israel. The watchman on the wall, the watchman of Israel, is proclaiming to Mount Seir, right? So if you go back, now that I've read some of this to you, the burden of Duma, he called unto me of Seir. Watchman, what of the night? Watch, what of the night? Watchman, what of the night? Okay? So then he says down here, in that following verse, the watchman said, the morning comes and also the night. If you will inquire you, return, come. Now, I'm going to go further into this. The final warning within verse 12 is used in the English as inquire you, return, come. Here the word return is translated from the Hebrew word shub, which means to turn back, return. Come is the final result of the return. The prophet is doing his job and advising the Edomites to repent and return unto God, or seek, inquire of him in their troubles. If you will inquire you, return, come. Return to the Lord. Esau, Edomites, return to the Lord, Esau. Return to the Lord. All right. I mean, wasn't Esau's father of God, right? Jacob's father and Esau's father were both the same man, Isaac. So Esau's father was Isaac. Return, come, Esau, the Edomites, return to God. The burden upon Arabia. Now, you can see the third burden is coming. So it was a brief 2-verse burden of Duma, which was, like I gave in the introduction, how Duma is related to the Edomites or Esau. It was basically Esau's wife, who was the daughter of Ishmael. Okay? Daughter of the son of Ishmael. Duma's daughter. What did I say up here? I'm going to have to go back up here and say it again because I confused myself by telling you about it. One of the daughters of Ishmael. Mahalah may have been the daughter of Duma. I said may have been. There's no proof. But Mahalath was a daughter of Ishmael. Duma was a son of Ishmael. Right? The city of Duma was named after Duma, son of Ishmael. Right? So Mahalath could have been Duma's daughter. Okay? Could have been. That's why he said, oh, Duma, the daughter of Duma. Anyway, going back. Where am I at here? I'm on verse 13. The third burden. The burden upon Arabia. In the forest in Arabia shall you lodge, O you travailing companies of Dedanim. The descendants of Dedan were nomads of the desert of Arabia. Ezekiel 27:20 indicates that these travelers were merchants of precious clothes for chariots. The burden is upon these nomads who were deserving judgment of God. All right. The inhabitants of the land of Timon brought water to him that was thirsty. They prevented with their bread him that fled. Okay, verse 14. This is difficult. It took me some research to get this. Timon is believed to be an oasis which lies about 200 miles north of El Medina and some 40 miles south of Dumat El Jandal in Duma, right? Now known as El Joff. It is on the ancient caravan road connecting the Persian Gulf with the Gulf of Aqaba, where they took part in the moving of the trade markets. And you can find that in Job 6:19. The people of Timon, the Ishmaelites, were doing a good thing and showing mercy to the Dedanims, bringing them water and bread, while the Dedanim in turn caused them to flee for their lives. All right? All right. So the inhabitants of Timah and brought water to him that was thirsty. They prevented him. They prevented with their bread him that fled. Right? Okay. So the people of Timah, Ishmaelites, were doing a good thing and showing mercy to the Dedanim. Okay. For they fled from the swords, from the drawn sword, and from the bent bow, and from the grievousness of war. The thankless Dedanim returned the generosity of the Ishmaelites of Timah with the edge of the sword and bent bow loaded with an arrow. This is enough to make the God of heaven very angry. Because the Ishmaelites were showing mercy, and then they got killed because of it. For thus hath the Lord said unto me, within a year, according to the years of the hireling, and all the glory of Kedar shall fail. All the glory of Kedar. Oh, the year of the hireling is a contract year. When a hireling agrees to a job, they fulfill it and expires precisely on that day. In this passage, Isaiah conveys the judgment will come to pass on exact day 1 year later. Okay, Kedar are a league of tribes of the Arabian desert. Kedar was the second son born of Ishmael, son of Abraham, and is linked to this judgment against Dedan within the passage. Dedan, the Dedanim, Dedan was a son of Jokshan, who was the son of Abraham and Keturah, right? That's Abraham's second wife, right? So they were half-brothers to the Kedar. From parallel inscriptions of Ashur-banipal, it is evident that Hazael, king of Kedar and Arabia, fought against Sennacherib's army between 691 and 689 BC in the region of Duma. Joph. Sennacherib was the king of Assyria, right? Okay, region of Duma, Joph, in Wadi Sirhan, and surrendered to Esarhaddon, who was the next king of Assyria. The date in which the prophecy was first given by Isaiah is unknown, but the fulfillment is definitely in the time frame of when Isaiah was prophesying these events to come. All right, so I'm going to read you something from Genesis 25:3. And Jokshan begot Sheba and Dedan, and sons of Dedan were Asherin and Letushim and Leamim. And then 1 Chronicles 1:29. These are the generations of the firstborn of Ishmael, Naboith, then Kedar, and Adbeel and Mibsam. So you can see where Kedar is firstborn of Ishmael, and then you can see Jokshan begot Sheba and Dedan of Arabia, right? God had sent Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, in a campaign to erase the Kedarites from the Arabian desert. The information in Jeremiah 49:28 combined with that in the Babylon Chronicle. This is the document here in the Babylon Chronicle. Shows that in 599 BC, units of Nebuchadnezzar's army raided the encampments of the Kedarites in the western region of the Syrian desert. Okay, and I'll read you Jeremiah 49:28. Concerning Kedar and concerning the kingdoms of Hazar, which Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon shall smite, thus saith the Lord, arise, you, go up to Kedar and spoil the men of the east. Right? So, the glory of the fall of Kedar, right? The firstborn of Ishmael. Okay, so there you have it. Oh, did I read this one? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't read through verse 17. I got to finish that, don't I? And the residue of the number of the archers, the mighty men of the children of Kedar, shall be diminished, for the Lord God of Israel has spoken it. As history books have confirmed, God fulfilled his announced judgments from both Isaiah and Ezekiel. Ezekiel has summarized what Isaiah had said was going to happen within verses 11 through 17. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, I will also stretch out my hand upon Edom, and will cut off man and beast from it, and I will make it desolate from Timon, and they of Dedan shall fall by the sword. That's a nice summary, isn't it? So, pretty cool. Isaiah, prophecies of Ezekiel, and Ezekiel confirms the prophecy right after Isaiah's of Ezekiel. Kind of ironic that Ezekiel is so well used as the prophet of that time, which Ezekiel was prophesying. Oh, excuse me, Isaiah was prophesying of a time in the future, right? 100 years later or so, 100 and some years. I have it that written here, but so he prophesies of Ezekiel, and then Ezekiel prophesies of a time close to come that had not come to pass yet, that confirms the prophet Isaiah's following prophecy after he prophesied of Ezekiel. It's ironic. It's irony, I think, because he's prophecies of Ezekiel. 12 and 13 is a prophecy of Ezekiel. And then the prophecy, the following, 13 through 17, is a prophecy of the time that Ezekiel is going to prophesy of. It's going to be something that is going to be fulfilled in the future that Ezekiel is prophesying of, confirming what Isaiah prophesied of. It's just amazing. I just think it's amazing. So, pretty cool stuff. Watch this video again if you want to review it, because it is a lot of information to see all at once. And hit like down below, subscribe to my channel, and next time we see me on YouTube with Isaiah will be chapter 22, which is another exciting chapter. So until the next time, may God bless you. Until then, and take care.